Thank you, that was wonderful. I love hearing those stories, and really everyone who comes after builds on the foundation of leaders such as you. So thank you for what you built in Colorado for us to bring forward. I'm going to shift gears and introduce our luncheon speaker today, Vanessa Otero. She's the creator of the Media Bias Chart. How many of you have seen this chart? Okay, it's quite interesting, and we're very fortunate to have her here today to really walk through her methodology and share about this. She created it. It's a viral image that prompts many lively discussions around the internet about where people get their news. Vanessa is a practicing patent attorney who recently founded Adventist Media to fulfill the need and reveal, by the popularity of the chart, the need for an easy-to-understand, reliable news rating system. Vanessa is a native of San Diego, California, and received a BA in English from UCLA. She graduated from, ready, drum roll, University of Denver, Stern College of Law, and in 2013, and practices patent law at the Newt Boren O'Dowd partnership in Boulder. In her practice, she helps technology companies of all sizes acquire and strategically deploy their intellectual property. As founder of Adventist Media, she seeks to impact the way consumers and organizations deal with today's complex media landscape. Please join me in welcoming Vanessa Otero.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yes. All right. I think we're going to be going a little bit over the scheduled 12:45. I think quite a bit over. Maybe closer. It's going to be, I think, closer to 1. If that's okay. But if I get the timeout sign earlier than that, then I'll just I'll wrap up early. But it's really my honor to be speaking with you today because you all are really my heroes for what you do in our democracy. And it's my hope that the work that I do can improve your ability to reach and to positively impact the people in your communities, news consumers who need this stuff. So if I have stickers of this if you want to take one home. I see you guys snapping some pictures. So I'm glad it looks like about a third of you had seen this online. So I'll talk today a little bit about why I, as a patent attorney, am here talking to you about media bias. So let's just go over what we're going to cover today. That background first. And a topic near and dear to my heart, which really gets into why this got so popular, which is that junk news is like junk food, and that's a pretty new problem. We'll get into the taxonomy and methodology of the chart a little bit. Most questions that I get about this chart have to do with how do you rank sources on this chart? And I could talk about that for hours. So I will not take hours today right after this lunch because you have other sessions to attend. But I will get into it a little bit, and I'll stick around after for questions. I won't just leave you with, here's a huge problem of junk news and junk food. I'll talk about what we can do about junk news, and you'll see I'm optimistic about that, and I hope at the end of this you will be too. And I'll try to leave it a few minutes for questions, but since we're going over, I'll just stick around in the hall for those. All right, so in the run-up to the election, I just put together this media bias chart to talk to my friends about their news sources that they were sharing online, because I was very alarmed that people would share sources of their very sketchy reputation. And really intelligent people would share really terrible sources. And so I put it online, and it went viral. In December of 2016, got millions and millions of views just within the first few days. And because of that, people started reaching out to me from all over the country. Teachers, college professors, people were printing this in textbooks, journalists were reaching out to me, and people would ask me things like, oh great, can you add more sources to this chart because I really want to see where X, Y, and Z fall. And it would also be great if you could add some other dimensions to it, like how many people are reading each one of these sources. And they'd ask for my data and my methodology. And at first that really surprised me. And I had data and I had a methodology, but I really had to, because of the interest, write more and develop more about it to publish it to show people what I was actually doing. So to fulfill on what people were asking, I ran a crowdfunding campaign because I wanted to create an interactive version of the media bias chart and rank more sources and give people the data that they wanted and the transparency. So in November 2018, we raised over $32,000 through a crowdfunding campaign. And now we're in the middle of a big project to expand on that. We have over 100,000 website visitors a month, and again, all of this was quite surprising to me, but I'll talk about why I think it got so popular. So I created this company called Adventist Media, and Adventist is Latin for to the source. The reason it's called that is because I'm a big nerd and I took Latin and I went to law school. And because we look at the actual source, we do content analysis of the news. We don't do opinion polling. Opinion polling is really subjective. Because if you ask somebody, do you trust Fox News? If they're conservative, they will say yes. If they're liberal, they will say no. So what does that really tell you about the overall trustworthiness of that source? Not really very much. So I created this to fulfill on that mission. The reason I think this got so popular is because people realize that there's a problem. And that problem is that junk news is like junk food. And currently we don't really know what's in our news. I mean, I'll spend a little bit of time on just the categories. The vertical category is generally overall quality, or you can think about it as overall reliability, or overall newsiness. Like towards the top is the most closest to the ideal of what we think of as news, and towards the bottom is farther away from that. And then the left to right spectrum is political bias. But I drew this as an image because as a patent lawyer, my whole job is to explain complex things in words and pictures. And words are nice, and I write lots and lots of words, but people don't like reading as much as they like looking at pictures, right? So I realized that there would be a way to lay this out. I mean, when I write a patent, I'll write lots and lots of words, but the picture is the thing that really delivers the understanding. And that's why I think this went viral. But since it went viral, I just really felt a responsibility to make it as good as I possibly could, because anybody can just put misinformation on a meme or a picture, and it spreads around like crazy, right? That's one of the really big problems on social media today. So junk food, how is junk news like junk food? Well, in the 50s and 60s, there was a proliferation of fast food and processed food, and that's great for feeding hungry populations and making sure everyone can get as many calories as they need. But we see what's happened because of that proliferation. Massive health epidemics. I mean, too many low quality, high calorie types of food out there that are cheap and easy to manufacture for the manufacturers. It causes a problem. And similarly, just in the last 10, maybe 15 years, we've had this explosion of news sources and news sources, right? So the stuff at the bottom isn't exactly news, but it's on the internet. It shows up in your Twitter feed or your social media feed, like Facebook, as if it is news and people rely on it. So what is that causing? Instead of a massive health epidemic, it's causing a massive polarization epidemic. So people who read news sources from over here and over here about the same story live in completely different universes, to the point where people are losing friends and family and not able to talk to anybody across the aisle, and bipartisanship at our national level is practically gone, and people are feeling really hopeless about it. This really is an epidemic, and I think that's the reason why so many people reached out to say, is there something that we can do to teach, at least younger people about this? Because you'll probably agree that folks, that young people growing up today with all these news sources are living in an entirely different world from us, or our parents, or our grandparents when it comes to news. So I know for sure that citizens and journalists and companies want to change things. But I really want to dive into a little bit more about how junk news is like junk food. I love this analogy. So the news right there at the top, in the middle, that's the good stuff. It's the lean proteins, and it's the vegetables and the fruit. It's that first column right there, original fact reporting, the work that you guys do, being out in the field. That original fact reporting is the good stuff. It's the nutritious stuff. So there's other stuff in this media landscape as well. Right below, it's a complex analysis and a mix of fact reporting and analysis. These are like your carbs, like your wheat bread and your white bread, and carbs are good. You need them. You need them for fuel. They're absolutely essential to a balanced diet. You need both your lean meats and proteins, and you need your carbs. And some of these are really excellent sources, like The Guardian, and ProPublica, and The Economist. They tend to help readers make sense of the facts. They provide context and understanding, so you definitely need both. But you don't want to eat just carbs, right? We don't want to just stuff ourselves and read takes on the news without reading the original sources. It gets worse from there, okay? And this is where most of our media landscape is. Most of our media landscape right now is donuts and fries and other versions of better and worse junk food. The stuff toward the top up here, not as bad as donuts and fries. Maybe it's more like rich cheeses and chocolates and wines, right? Again, you don't want to have your whole diet be like that, but it's good to enjoy it from time to time. But what most people spend their time reading, watching is, on cable, Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. And you can do that for hours and hours and hours every day. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, people think that they're getting news, but where do we have CNN ranked? We have it ranked in the middle of opinion and analysis. Because if you watch CNN from about 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., you'll probably only hear about 4 or 5 stories. Each hour is typically a fire or a blizzard or some kind of a major event like that, and then 3 things Trump did or said today, right? And then they'll have 10 people come talk about it and just beat it to death, right? That's not exactly news. And that's just the TV. CNN.com has more news stories. CNN International produces a lot of great journalism, but that's not what people spend their time reading and watching. And as a result, people just feel angry and sick, which makes sense because if you ate donuts and fries and that was your entire diet, it would make you feel that way as well. But it's still edible, right? It still has some, nutritional value. I mean, potatoes are technically a vegetable, right? It's better than nothing. You're not going to die. You will survive. It'll get you to the next day. But then there's the stuff that you just know is bad for you, especially towards the bottom, and this stuff, right? This is like cigarettes and booze, okay? And this stuff, you know is bad for you, and you don't even care. You're like, you know what? I just want to enjoy my life. I want to read something I totally agree with, and that it makes my uncle mad or makes my nephew mad, right? And it will not kill you if you will not kill you immediately, but it's terrible for you, and it probably will cause some bad health effects down the road. Now, most of this stuff, is legal. It's part of our ecosystem. People consume it all the time. And it's not fake news. Most of the stuff on this chart is not fake news. Just the very, very, very bottom here. that's where the fake news, but there's a whole universe underneath that's the fake news. So we know that's like drugs and poison, that's clearly terrible, but that's not the biggest problem we're trying to address. There are a lot of people trying to address fake news, but we're trying to get at the topic of polarization. All right. So, touch a little bit on how we rank these sources. The taxonomy I find is helpful because, as I like to say, all generalizations are false. Sorry, my formatting's a little messed up right there. But there are a couple of ways to talk about the news. And one way is really general, saying CNN is the worst. I get lots of opinions on CNN because even if you know nothing about the news, you have seen CNN, right? So I have a blog post entitled "Everybody Has an Opinion on CNN." Now this is it's more general, and because it's more general, the less true it is, right? You can come up with counterexamples of this very easily, where CNN was not the worst, there was actually something worse than it, or where CNN did something that was actually very, very good. So lots of counterexamples. But people talk like this because it's very easy to communicate, and it's hard to communicate the opposite, something very specific. So you can say, on June 8, 2012, CNN aired when it initially reported that the Supreme Court struck down the individual mandate of the Affordable Care Act. In fact, the court upheld the mandate, and CNN rushed to read the opinion and reported it wrong, okay? People don't talk like that because it's very specific, and because the specific's more true, but it's hard to communicate. So the media bias chart strikes a balance here. So we say CNN is generally here, and then we can have a discussion. It's a balance between general and specific, contains some of the nuance, but not all of it, and it's easy to communicate. So just going from the top to the bottom, the vertical categories on the chart categorize, what makes a news source good. And there are several layers reflected in this overall quality axis. One thing that you can't necessarily see on here is importance. Importance, like a major national story that affects absolutely everybody versus something that's less important, like a gossip story about celebrities. That's factored in as well. But the things we take into account are, we ordered these things to reflect the value that journalists bring to news. So the most important stuff at the top of the media bias chart is original fact reporting. It's the work that you guys do. It's the work that journalists do, interviewing people, following up on sources, looking at primary sources, attending events. Fact reporting is also important. Even if you didn't get the story, but you're spreading it and you're redistributing it, that's also important. Complex analysis. A lot of these sources you'll recognize as some of your favorite news sources, like The Economist, or The Guardian, or Time Magazine. And complex, they'll have 4,000, 6,000 word, very in-depth articles, and those are excellent, but they wouldn't exist without the original fact reporting, right? Then there's a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of analysis out there, and there's a lot of opinion. And those are a dime a dozen. That's what's really proliferated in the past few years. Then there are a few different ways in which news sources can be bad. It's not all just fake or not fake. Stories can be selective or incomplete. They can be unfair. They can be propagandistic or contain misleading information, and then they can get into inaccurate and fabricated info. Oh, that's the button I'm not supposed to press. It turns it off. All right. So the taxonomy of the left-right scale, what this reflects is the U.S. political environment on a left-right continuum, and it's a current, it's contemporary U.S. politics. So these things shift over time, right? This, we account for a few types of bias, like political position bias, linguistic bias, and this is necessarily a moving target, because what was hyper-partisan left just in 2006, 2007, same-sex marriage being legal was a hyper-partisan left position. But today, it's more like a skewed left-neutral position. This can shift very quickly. For example, build a wall used to be a very most extreme right position, and now since many conservative politicians have adopted it, it's more of a just skewed right position. I pressed the button again. Okay, all right, so I don't have time to get into a deep dive in the methodology, but what we have right now is a project with 20 analysts across the country with political views left, right, and center. So 6 of them are lean left and solid left, 6 of them are lean right and solid right, and 8 of them are some version of centrist. So we're evaluating over 2,000 articles and TV shows. And each one of them is being rated by 4 individual analysts, and we're using this data to populate our next version of the media bias chart. We hope to continue that work. That's why I created a company around this, but we should be releasing that version in June. And we train them on article grading rubrics. We have certain we have methodology for articles that we rate people on all these things. Did you catch that? All right, great. And then we also rate them on bias. Look at that. Oh, look at all the things we do. Okay. I have copies of this. It's all on my website. I could talk about it all day. But it's really important to get down to individual shows and individual articles, because the more granular you can get, the more you can agree. And we can agree even if we're on different sides of the political spectrum. So here are where the CNN shows themselves fall. Here's where the Fox News shows. And, I really find a lot of common ground. I myself, in my politics, would be in the skews left column, but I find a lot of common ground with people who skew right or are more right than that when I show them this. Some of the shows on Fox News, like Shepard Smith Reporting or America's Newsroom, are just a little bit skewed right, but they're still, fact reporting and complex analysis. Whereas others, like Hannity and Justice with Judge Jeanine, are really damaging and contain a lot of misleading information. And even people who are very familiar with Fox News programming tend to agree with this kind of breakdown, and that's important. We break it down per network, so there's lots of nuance to it. Our interactive version of the chart will show detail like this. So if you want to see our ranking on the New York Times, it's all these are individual articles that we ranked. These would be left-leaning opinion columns. These would be right-leaning opinion columns. We come to an overall composite rating based on those. So it's our thesis is that the most damaging kind of content in our news environment is the most polarizing content, which tends to be this stuff highlighted in red. Okay, the stuff that if you read just this stuff, you likely live in a different world from other people who you politically disagree with. So that was all the bad news that this stuff all exists. What can we do about it? We want to do something about it, and I know that we can, but it's going to take a concerted effort. It's going to take an effort to tackle junk news like it took for people to tackle junk food, because now in food and health and exercise, we have a model to follow for how to improve this problem. There is now health food. That's a thing. There are gyms. There are more fitness and health choices for young people and adults today than there were 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and certainly when fast food and junk food started becoming really prevalent. And there's a role for everyone to play in this, and it's going to take all of us. Citizens need to do their part, companies need to do their part, and so do journalists. So what can citizens do? So citizens, one, can clean up their information diet, right? That's the easiest part of being, that's one of the parts of being healthy. So, but there's not just that. If you want to be healthy with your body, you can improve your diet, and you can also, exercise, work out, exactly. So there's a corollary to this. We can do civic exercise. What is civic exercise? Civic exercise is things like voting, volunteering, you're working on a campaign, calling an elected official, engaging in a dialogue with people who disagree with you through an organization. Not formatting, sorry guys. It turned out well on my computer. But the companies have a huge role to play in this, and I wish I had more time to spend on it, because this is where my company's focus is. Ad Adventist Media is really looking to play a role in the way that brands interact with the news media. Because what do good news sources and junk news sources have in common? They're funded by advertising dollars. And there's obviously subscription revenue and other ways to make money, but the reason that there are so many terrible news sites is because it's profitable, very profitable because of advertisers. And advertisers actually have a very limited insight into the role that their ads play in the proliferation of junk news. Just one quick example. This site is WND. Anybody familiar with WND? Okay, it's a lower right on the corner of my chart. They're really big pushers of the Obama was born in Kenya conspiracy theory, actual fake news, right? So who advertised on there? Well, Amazon and Whole Foods, right? Prime member, save even more, right? But Amazon advertises everywhere, so that's not that unusual. But this doesn't really make sense because WND actually pushes fake news stories. So in Amazon advertises on WND. Who owns Amazon? Jeff Bezos. What news organization does Jeff Bezos also own? Washington Post. What is Washington Post's tagline? Democracy dies in darkness. Fake news is the darkness. This is fake news. They're literally funding the darkness. So as one part of their organization, they are advocating for journalism and the press and all the important work that whole ecosystem does, and with another part of the organization, they're wasting their work. And that's a problem that we intend to solve. I won't get into exactly how we do that because we don't have enough time, but that's what we want to do about it. But what can you do about it as journalists? Okay? Well, the one thing you can do is keep up the good work, because you know what you do every day. You know the standards that you hold yourself to, and you know what kind of work goes into it and what goes into the editorial process. And what you're doing is news. It's real news. Kind of like food. Before we had organic food and health food, what did we call that type of food? Just food. Right? It was just food. It wasn't organic food. It wasn't locally grown, GMO, non-GMO, or anything like that. It's not just health food. It was food. And what you're doing is news. But there's an opportunity to rebrand it. Realize that journalism is the health food industry. It just needs a little bit of rebranding. So you are local news, right? People love local food. It's organic. It's something you can find in your community. You can find it at the farmer's market. People love this stuff. If people start realizing that local food is like local news, I think that people will realize that that's the opportunity for them to become healthier. You can even, there are so many analogies you can make. It's not that you do farm to table, but you do more like field to paper, right? Lots of opportunities here, and it's my hope that one day, I really look forward to this day when all news consumers can realize that some of the best, healthiest news options are right in their own backyard. It's a pleasure speaking to you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll be around for questions.